Welcome back. You're watching WION The World is One, and this is World Day Now with me, Jyotsna Kumar. Let's begin with the headlines. At least 39 people have died in a stampede at actor-turned-politician Vijay's rally in Tamil Nadu's Karur. Chief Minister M.K. Stalin orders a panel to probe the incident.
Exercised its right to defend its people against terrorism and brought its organizers and perpetrators to justice.
India launches scathing attack on Pakistan at the 80th session of the United Nations General Assembly, accusing it of being behind decades of international terror attacks.
Bharat will always maintain its freedom of choice and will always be a voice of the global south.
India says it will maintain freedom of choice as External Affairs Minister S. Jaishankar accuses wealthy nations of hypocrisy in global trade and selective responses to crisis. Russia's top diplomat Sergei Lavrov warned of a decisive response to any aggression from NATO and the West after U.S. President Donald Trump backed calls to shoot down Russian planes that violate NATO airspace. Thousands of people marched in downtown Buenos Aires to demand justice for the brutal murders of 3 women, which were live streamed in a case that has shocked Argentina. Thousands attend a rally in support of Pakistan's jailed former Prime Minister Imran Khan in Peshawar. Khan had called on the public to attend the rally, describing it as a demonstration for the nation's freedom. Swami Chaitanyanand Saraswati, accused of sexually harassing girl students of a Delhi institute, has been arrested from Agra. Trump's trade wars mounted bets that foreign buyers would boycott American asset when it comes to U.S. stocks. The opposite is true. Stocks now make up nearly 32% of foreigners' allocations to U.S. assets, breaking a record that's been in place since 1968. In India's southern state of Tamil Nadu, at least 39 people are dead and 58 injured after a stampede broke out during actor-turned-politician and TVK chief Vijay's campaign rally in Karur district. Now, several attendees fainted as the crowd swelled beyond control, following which the stampede took place. Children and party workers began collapsing, triggering panic. Vijay, who was addressing the crowd, paused his speech immediately. He urged calm, asking his supporters to make way for ambulances. Emergency teams rushed in and medical aid was deployed on site. Water bottles were handed out to help the distressed, and those in critical condition were moved to nearby hospitals. Chief Minister M.K. Stalin has announced an ex gratia of 10 lakh rupees for the families of those who lost their lives in the tragedy. Chief Minister Stalin has also ordered a high-level inquiry into the incident. Meanwhile, the Ministry of Home Affairs has sought a detailed report from Tamil Nadu government on the circumstances that led to the stampede. Former Minister and DMK leader Senthe Balaji visited a hospital in Karur and met the injured victims. He said over 58 people have been admitted in the hospital. Among those, 46 are in private hospitals and 12 in the government facility.
I'm standing here with deep sorrow. I'm unable to describe the horrific accident that took place in Karur. Yesterday around 7:45 p.m. IST, while I was in Chennai speaking with officials, I received the news that such an incident had taken place in Karur. As soon as I received the information, I called former Minister Sendil Balaji, asked him to inquire and instructed him to go to the hospital. When I heard the news about the death toll, I instructed the nearby ministers to go to Karur.
Prime Minister Narendra Modi has offered his condolences. In a post on X, Prime Minister said, and I'm quoting here, "The unfortunate incident during a political rally in Karur, Tamil Nadu is deeply saddening. My thoughts are with the families of those who lost their loved ones, wishing strength to them in this difficult time, praying for a swift recovery to all those injured." And while joining us live on the broadcast is our principal correspondent, Siddharth MP, on the phone line. Thank you so much, Siddharth, for joining us. If you could just quickly tell us, what is the ground situation as of now?
So as it stands, Chief Minister M.K. Stalin has conducted a review. He's visited the victims undergoing treatment at the hospital. The latest figures that we have from the Tamil Nadu government is that there are 39 people who unfortunately lost their lives in this incident. So it's a mix of men, women and children that have lost their lives. So because this was a political event and not just a standard political event, it involved one of the biggest cinema stars in the country itself. He's not just limited to Tamil Nadu because this is one of the highest earning actors in India and he's got a massive fan following. So it is for him that people had gathered on the streets. So which is why it was not just the adults and the voting population, but people had gathered along with children to catch a glimpse of their star. But you know what transpired there was that people had waited for several hours. It was a pretty hot and humid day. At least 35 degrees centigrade was the temperature average on, throughout yesterday pretty much. So it is amid such a situation that this rally was held inside the city in very cramped roads and in very cramped public spaces. So people had to obviously wait for hours. There are also clear indications that the police had to resort to bait and charge at one point in time. There are some suspicions, unconfirmed though, that could have perhaps aggravated the stampede-like situation later last night. So there are several issues swirling about right now. There are 39 people who've lost their lives, unfortunately. 51 people who are undergoing treatment. We're given to understand that only one person in that 51 is in a kind of bad situation and, treatment is being offered to all of them. At the same time, let's remember that the government has announced that there will be a one-person commission headed by a retired court judge who will be probing the incident and what took place there. As for the police, they say that they received a very minimal estimate from the party that is organizing this event on how many people are expected to turn up, but then the crowds swelled much more than that, and they had made enough adequate arrangements for security to be provided at the particular venue. So that's what the police maintains. However, we'll have to wait to see whether there were any further lapses on the police's part, because clearly it has emerged that the police were involved in some instances of bait and charging the crowd. So this is something that could have perhaps aggravated the situation there on the ground when it comes to the stampede-like situation that emerged all of a sudden. So, the situation overall looks very bad because, it's very rare for such kind of a mishap to take place at a political event. Questions are also being raised as to why such an event could not have been hosted perhaps at an open ground where there would have been better crowd management measures and, larger spaces for people to gather rather than crammed city roads or rather district roads where anyway there's not too much space for even routine traffic to move. But imagine a political gathering happening at one such venue. So these are the questions being raised. And obviously at this point in time, it's even still a little too early to comment because the government maintains that we'll have to wait for the committee's report before the government can comment anything on what took place. That's what we're given to understand at this point in time.
Absolutely. Of course, several questions are being raised as to, as you mentioned, why did the whole event take place in such a small space, especially when we know that such an event has been taking place before. The actor turned politician has, of course, made this whole event a bigger one. Last time we saw that. But thank you so much for joining us on the phone line and giving us all the details. And India's External Affairs Minister S. Jaishankar addressed the 80th United Nations General Assembly on Saturday. In his speech, Jaishankar questioned the viability of the UN in resolving ongoing military confrontations and tore into Pakistan over terrorism without mentioning its name. Jaishankar warned countries against turning a blind eye to support for terrorism from Pakistan and demanded a much deeper global cooperation against terrorism.
Asserting our rights, we must also firmly face up to threats. Countering terrorism is a particular priority because it synthesizes bigotry, violence, intolerance, and fear. India has confronted this challenge since independence, having a neighbor that is an epicenter of global terrorism. Relentless pressure must be applied on the entire terrorism ecosystem. Those who condone nations that sponsor terror will find that it comes back to bite them.
The External Affairs Minister also mentioned Operation Sindoor, saying that India exercised its right to defend its people.
The most recent example of cross-border barbarism was the murder of innocent tourists in Pahalgam in April this year. India exercised its right to defend its people against terrorism and brought its organizers and perpetrators to justice.
Jaishankar also criticized the UN's role in recent conflicts and its resistance to bring in reforms, adding that UN was at gridlock state and was losing its credibility to forge a common ground.
An objective report card will show that the UN is in a state of crisis. When peace is under threat from conflicts, when development is derailed by lack of resources, when human rights are violated by terrorism, the UN remains gridlocked.
The minister called for an end to hostilities in Ukraine and Gaza and extended its support to any initiative that helps restore peace. He added that nations who can engage all sides must step up in a search for the solutions. In his speech, Jaishankar pointed out to the slow progress of SDG Agenda 2030 as well as climate action. He also hit out at wealthy countries for insulating themselves with energy and food, but also expressed confidence about India's rise to the global stage and voiced support for countries of the global south.
As the most populous nation, as a civilizational state, as a rapidly growing major economy, we are confident about who we are and what we will be. Bharat will always maintain its freedom of choice and will always be a voice of the global south.
He also highlighted the three key concepts adopted by India to guide its approach in the contemporary world as self-reliance, self-defense, and self-confidence.
Bharat approaches the contemporary world guided by three key concepts. Atmanirbharta, or self-reliance. That means developing our own capabilities, building our own strengths, and nurturing our own talent. Atmaraksha, or securing oneself. We remain determined to protect our people and secure their interests at home and abroad. Atmavishwas, or self-confidence. As the most populous nation, as a civilizational state, as a rapidly growing major economy, we are confident about who we are and what we will be.
Moving on, Russian Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov has warned of a decisive response to any aggression after U.S. President Donald Trump backed calls to shoot down Russian planes that violate NATO airspace. Several European countries say Russian fighter jets and drones have violated their airspace over the recent weeks as Moscow presses on with its invasion of Ukraine. Lavrov made it clear that its trade relations with India are not under threat, despite U.S. President Trump imposing punitive tariffs on Indian goods over the purchase of Russian oil. Responding to a question from WION at a press conference after his speech, he said that Kremlin fully respects India and its foreign policy that Prime Minister Narendra Modi is carrying out for its national interest.
India has continued purchasing Russian oil, even as the United States has pressed countries to reduce such imports. First of all, how do you view this relationship with India in this context, and what does it mean for India-Russia relations more broadly?
We have full respect for the national interests of India, full respect for the foreign policy that Narendra Modi is carrying out to promote these national interests. What we buy from other countries, not the United States, but from Russia or other countries, that's our own business. And that has nothing to do with the Indian-US agenda. And I believe that that is a very worthy response that shows that India, like Turkey, has self-respect.
Lavrov again referred to the answer again after being asked another question about the India-Russia economic partnership. He added that India is free to choose its own partners.
Regarding the oil question, I already answered it for your colleague who also represents Indian media, but you phrase the question this way. Are there any chances to salvage the economic partnership between Russia and India? It's not under threat, I have no doubt. No one is encroaching on it, and if someone were to take such steps, I'll say it again. The Indian Prime Minister and the Indian Foreign Minister have both explained that India chooses its own partners.
Earlier speaking at the United Nations General Assembly, Lavrov warned NATO and the European Union that any aggression against Russia will be met with a decisive response.
Threats of force against Russia, accused of practically planning an attack on the North Atlantic Alliance and the European Union, are becoming increasingly common. President Putin has repeatedly debunked such provocations. Russia has never had and does not have such intentions, but any aggression against my country will be met with a decisive response.
Now, speaking later to reporters, Lavrov said that if any country downs objects still within Russian airspace, they will very much regret it. NATO, which considers an attack on one ally an attack on all, has been considering whether to shoot down Russian planes in what would be a dramatic raising of the stakes with Russia. Now, U.S. President Donald Trump on Tuesday voiced support for downing Russian planes. However, Lavrov still went out of his way to praise Trump, underlining his administration's desire to develop pragmatic cooperation without adopting an ideological stance. Lavrov's more critical comments were aimed at Europe, especially Germany. He suggested that Germany is returning to its Nazi past in the loaded attack on Chancellor Friedrich Merz. Lavrov denounced what he called militaristic rhetoric from Merz. Merz has called for Europe to step up its own defense spending, pointing to Russia's invasion of Ukraine. For more on this, our correspondent Susan Terani sent us this report from New York.
In his address here at the United Nations, Russian Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov reiterated Russia's readiness for negotiations over Ukraine as long as Russia's security concerns and the rights of Russian-speaking populations are assured. He firmly rejected Western accusations against Moscow and warned that any aggression toward Russia would be met with, quote, a decisive response. On institutional reform, he called for more representation at the United Nations Security Council, endorsing permanent seats for India and Brazil as part of a broader expansion across Asia, Africa, and Latin America. Susan Tehrani reporting from New York for WION World is One.
Global news. Denmark again reported sightings of unidentified drones, and this time over its biggest military base and other military sites. This continues a week-long trend of suspicious drone sightings. According to Danish police, 1 to 2 drones were spotted over the Karur military base, which is Denmark's biggest and houses all of the armed forces, helicopters, airspace surveillance, and parts of the defense command. Neighboring Norway also reported suspicious drones near its biggest military base, Orland, where its F-35 fighter jets are parked. The frequent drone sightings have shuttered multiple Danish airports throughout this week. Their Copenhagen airport, the busiest in Denmark, shut its operations for nearly 4 hours after suspected drones were seen in the skies above the airport. Danish Prime Minister called the drone flights the most serious attack on Danish critical infrastructure, part of hybrid attacks on Denmark, and hasn't ruled out Russian involvement.
In any case, I cannot reject in any way that it could be Russia. We have seen drones over Poland that should not have been there. We have seen activity in Romania. We have seen violations of Estonian airspace. We have seen hacker attacks at European airports over the weekend, and now there have been drones in Denmark, and it seems that there have been drones in Oslo and in Norway as well, so therefore I cannot say anything else than that this is, in my eyes, a serious attack on Danish critical infrastructure.
But Moscow has firmly rejected any role in these incidents. The Kremlin even suggested that they are a staged provocation by NATO meant to instigate Russia. As the threat from drone warfare mounts, Europe is pulling out all stops to thwart any possible attack. Germany has said that it will take all measures to defend itself and its European neighbors.
On the one hand, I will set up a drone defense center that will ensure that the competences of the federal and state governments, the federal police, the Federal Criminal Police Office, and the state police are connected, financial resources are pooled, technological know-how is brought together, and new research projects are initiated.
Amid these developments, Copenhagen will host an EU summit next week, gathering heads of government of European nations. Denmark has accepted a Swedish offer of Stockholm's anti-drone technology to ensure the meeting can proceed without disruption. The Fed's September cut extended a fresh lifeline to Wall Street, with U.S. stocks closed to record highs. But beneath the surface, there are signs of a shift that was reflected in market moves last week. First, let's take a closer look at how broader assets traded last week. Oil was the top gainer last week, surging over 6%. Brent crude notched its biggest weekly gain in more than 3 months, rising past the $70 per barrel mark for the first time since late July. While there is no indication that a broader downturn in global markets is imminent, the landscape is more fragile than it was just a week ago. Flows are moving into safer assets at the fastest pace in months. Gold is the biggest beneficiary, rising nearly 2% last week, adding to the over 10% surge since August. That comes even as the dollar had its strongest week since early August, gaining 0.5%. However, traders have added to their bets against the greenback, with speculators holding $8.6 billion in aggregate shorts, adding to the diminished sentiment. Cryptos at one point shed roughly $300 billion in value last week. A wave of forced liquidations dragged Bitcoin and Ether sharply lower, marking one of the most volatile stretches since the summer. Now turning to the Asia-Pacific stock markets, most regional benchmarks ended the week in the green, barring India, while stocks in Japan, China, and Australia closed marginally higher. India Sensex shed 2.7%. Trump's dual shocks have also thwarted bets on an Indian stock market rebound on the boost from GST cuts. In the Americas, the S&P 500 fell 0.3%, the first decline in a month. The tech-heavy Nasdaq 100 also notched its first down week since end of August with a 0.7% drop. Whether by instinct or fatigue, the pullback reflects a broader reassessment of the risk assets. While Canadian stocks were steady and unchanged, Brazilian stocks fell a touch from Trump's tariff shocker. Across the Atlantic, European stocks reflected economic optimism despite France's troubles in managing its finances. It was a green reading across European benchmarks, with the UK's FTSE leading the gains. Trump's tariffs on patented drugs late in the week weighed on pharma stocks in the region. Still, broader European stock benchmarks closed out the week in the green. New York enjoyed the premiere of Mark Wahlberg's latest movie, Play Dirty. More details about that on our next report. Well, that's all on World DNA today. I'll sign up on the other side of a very short break. We begin with Pakistan Prime Minister Shehbaz Sharif, who has admitted that terrorists indeed operate on Pakistani soil at the UNGA. More details on the other side on that. Keep watching Beyond World is One.
राष्ट्रीय स्वयंसेवक संघ। किसी के लिए ये विचार कट्टर है तो किसी के लिए यही भारत की आत्मा है, किसी के लिए ये विद्रोह है तो किसी के लिए राष्ट्र निर्माण के सिद्धांत।
तो उन्होंने कहा कि ये अपना हिंदू समाज,
ये सिर्फ संगठन नहीं,
अब इसको संगठित करना चाहिए।
100 बरस की तपस्या है।
हमारा संगठन तो एक अभेद्य किला है, इसके दीवारों पर चंचू प्रहार करने वालों की चोचें वही टूट कर गिर जाएगी।
एक चिंगारी से वट वृक्ष। देखिए सदी का संग्राम आरएसएस की शताब्दी पर धारणाओं को चुनौती देने जल्द आ रहा है। केसरिया at 100।
As Bollywood biggies take the legal route, we decode what the protection of personality rights entails. Know all about the actors who are trying their hand in direction. And meet Rachel Lee Goldenberg, the director of Swipe. All this and much more with me, Diksha Bisla, on WION at these times.
From the bustling trading floors of Wall Street to the vibrant exchanges of Asian stock markets, WION breaks it down for you to make sense of what's happening, as we reveal the key factors behind events, strategic battles, and the game-changing business decisions that shape the world. We bring you all of this and more on World Business Watch.
The world's empty promises crumble as bombs rain on Gaza. The recognition grows, but the suffering only deepens. Iran races to rebuild missile factories in its war with Israel, desperate to restore its military might. Turkey battles its worst drought in 50 years. Water vanishing, fields cracking, and the relentless heat.
Watch the West Asia Post with me, Radi Francis, only on WION. World is One.
Welcome back. Thanks for staying with us. You're watching Beyond World this one. I'm Jyotsna Kumar. Let's begin with the headlines. At least 39 people have died in a stampede at actor-turned-politician Vijay's rally in Tamil Nadu's Karur. Chief Minister M.K. Stalin orders a panel to probe the incident.